Hello all, and welcome to the Business-Driven Master Data Management webinar. My name is Juha Korpela, I'm from Ellie Technologies, and I have here with me Mike Ferguson. Today we will be talking about master data management and the things that are really important when you are doing that. Now, today's agenda is going to be in two parts. So first, of course, brief introductions, but the main parts of today's presentations will be first Mike telling us about how to reduce complexity and operational cost with master data management, and then I will tell you a little bit about how Ellie and conceptual modeling techniques help you to deliver and be successful with your MDM initiatives. There will be time for Q&A in the end, so a little bit of practicalities. There is this chat window, you can use that and post any questions there. They will be taken into account in the end, and we will be answering those questions with Mike. The whole setup here and all the presentations on the webinar will be recorded and will be made available via Ellie's YouTube channel in the coming few days. Also, the presentation materials will be made available to all of you who have registered. I think those are the most important things. We will be taking about an hour of your time here today, so we can get started with a brief introduction of Mike. So, Mike, feel free to say hi to all the attendees.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for taking time to join us today.
Excellent. Mike is hailing us from London, right?
Oh, UK, a little bit north of London, but yes.
Right, that's good. And Mike, of course, many of you know Mike. Mike has 40 years experience in data management, especially very good things about master data management. And I think you know every single vendor in the whole data management business these days. So, so really great to have you on board and have you chatting with us about master data management.
Okay.
Cool. We will, without further ado, start. And Mike, you're free to take off from here. Share your presentation,
Okay.
please.
Great. Thanks. Okay. Can you see that? I hope.
Yes.
Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Many thanks again for joining us. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about why you should implement master data management and what the business benefits are from doing that, and then where would you start in building that, and why a data concept model is really important to getting up and running fast, and then talk about the kind of key steps involved in implementing master data management to kind of allow you to get control of that particular kind of data. Okay, so let me just start by asking you a simple question, which is really about why should you implement master data management? If you have an ERP system, which pretty well every business does, if you were to ask the question, like how many have duplicates, maybe duplicate customers in your ERP system? I mean, a lot of companies suffer from this. I know this from my own consulting experience, pretty well all over the world. And I would just ask some basic questions if you do. And that is, what happens if you invoice a customer? So do you send the invoice to every duplicate within your ERP system? Do you send it to one of them, or do you send it to some of them? Also, what happens if you receive payment, which is always a nice thing, and your customer pays you? Do you then associate or take the invoice attached, attach it to or match it up with which record in your ERP system? Do you match it up to one of those duplicate records, some of them, or all of them? And what happens if customer details have changed? Maybe customer contacts you and says, well, actually the address on this invoice isn't exactly right. Could you change it? So what do you do then? I mean, do you update one of those duplicate records? Do you update some of them or all of them? And if you change them, then, or change a record, do you then send that change to other systems from your ERP system? And if you do you send all of the customer duplicate records? Do you send some of them, or do you send one of them? I mean, you get the problem here. Just a very simple thing like that can cause all kinds of issues with regards to doing basic business in any business. And master data is without any shadow of a doubt, the most widely used data and widely shared data in any business. Things like customers and products and suppliers, employee data, for example. And if you take a look at product data, the challenge around this is even more significant. You could have a product that sells under different brands in different countries. You could have the product that is information needs to appear on websites, not just your own, but perhaps reseller websites. If you're a manufacturer and you sell to retailers and they then carry all of the product information, you've got to make sure that that's all correct. There could be physical printed brochures that are out there as well. So all of that collateral that needs to be kept synchronized. You could have, as I said, different countries that you sell your product in, maybe even the same brand. And the problem there is what happens if you've got different regulations in different countries, so different attributes associated with different countries, location specific attributes. All of that has to be maintained and kept correct in all geographies within which you sell your products. It's a real challenge around that kind of master data. Not just customer, as we talked about before. And many companies that I have done consulting with don't just have one ERP system. They may operate globally and could have different instances of the same ERP system in multiple parts of the world, or they could be part of a bigger group, in which case there could be multiple instances of an ERP system across the group. Rather than necessarily one. I mean, I have a client at the moment that has 5 ERP systems trying to consolidate it, but right now they're dealing with 5. So if you change anything on any one of those systems, let alone the duplicates problem we just spoke about, you can imagine what needs to happen. You have to then update everything else. And you're doing that across multiple ERP systems, which is a significant challenge. And of course, there's lots of other systems that would need to know about those changes beyond just another instance of the same system. So when you look at it, for most of my clients that don't have MDM implemented, they have a problem. Multiple systems independently updating their own databases. And there could be copies or subsets of master data stored in each of those respective databases, maybe with different identifiers, different data names for the same data across those databases. And as a result, you could be gradually becoming more and more inconsistent as these updates occur, or if you're not telling everyone else about it. And so it's not surprising to see people without MDM having synchronization and conflict problems as different copies of that master data or different subsets of it get updated locally in various application databases. And of course, if you do make changes to any particular application local database on master data, you should be telling all of the other systems that need to know about it. But then again, if you keep doing this, if I update one system, I have to tell everything else. If I update a different system, I have to tell everyone else. And so, that has to be done for every single master data entity. And if I add another application on here, even more data flows have to occur to just keep data synchronized to the point that you get spaghetti architecture. And then you have to ask yourself the questions, well, who's got the right version of the master data? Which version is trusted? Is there any trusted version of this data anywhere in the enterprise? And how do I know when it was last refreshed? Where was it last refreshed? How do I know if I can trust it? All of these questions are out there, but the biggest question of all for me is how much does it cost your business to operate this way and run this huge spaghetti ball coming from inconsistent master data and trying to keep it synchronized across applications in a point-to-point manner. And if you think about it, if you had master data under control, how much complexity could you remove from all of this? How much operational cost could you remove from all of this? The amounts of strands of spaghetti that could come out of this architecture could be significant, and yet you probably wouldn't lose any data because you still got your master data managed. It's just that you don't have huge synchronization problems as you try to build point-to-point data flows between all of these applications. So master data should itself be application independent in order to be able to then synchronize it with any kind of system that you need to, whether those are transaction systems, as you kind of see along the bottom here, or analytical systems. Similarly, also, it could be for any kind of master data, such as financial chart of accounts. It could be for customers or suppliers or assets or employees, products, all of these key pillars of data within your enterprise that you're trying to keep synchronized across transactional and analytical systems. And of course, the assumption is, well, why do we need to do this? What's the point? Well, we all assume our business processes work okay. And in an ideal world, they would all be smoothly running as orders come in, go from order to cash, through multiple applications shouldn't be a problem. But if there's problems in your master data, there's no guarantee that these processes that you have work that smoothly. So for example, if you're trying to consistently supply master data to all applications involved in a business process, what happens if you don't synchronize some of those applications? Then chances are you're going to end up with data anomalies and therefore potentially slow down the process, maybe even stop the process while we need human intervention to try and fix the problem before the process can continue. And so ultimately incur more unplanned operational costs and slow your overall business efficiency down. And if you look at it across any business process where this occurs, there's going to be a cost to fix it, whether it's associated with anomalies on data coming in around master data, for example, on an order, maybe to do with customers or product information. And that could domino if you don't fix it all the way down into other parts of the business process, other applications, cause even more problems that then have to be fixed there at additional cost, and maybe even have manual intervention. And so you kind of think, well, what's the cost of fixing all of these anomalies? You might think, well, it's just a cost of just doing that once within this business process. Well, unfortunately, that would be wrong. The cost is only realized when you look at the fact that I add up the cost of each of these anomalies and then multiply it by the number of occurrences in which the process executes. So how many orders have you got in a day? If you had this in investment banking on foreign exchange trades, how many foreign exchange trades do you do in a day? I have a customer that does over 1 million of those in a day. So if you have any kind of unplanned costs associated with each instance of that, each one of those transactions, it could be very, very pricey to resolve it. And that's just talking about orders in this case. How many other types of transactions exist within your business? That could be subjected to this problem, and unplanned operational costs occurs as a result of it. And if you just leave it alone and let your business scale, guess what? Your unplanned operational costs will just go with it. And therefore, despite the fact that your business is growing, your cost line is growing with it, and so your profit margins are not what they were expected to be. And if you have multiple product lines within your organization and you're organized around product lines, maybe you have multiple instances of the same process occurring within your organization. And if that's the case, could you imagine what happens if your master data is inconsistent across each instance of that process, now your cost goes up even higher than it was with one instance. And there's lots of companies out there with multiple instances of applications and business processes today. And if I take the whole thing global with this kind of setup, can you imagine the unplanned operational cost of inconsistent, unmanaged, and ungoverned master data? Absolutely horrendous. So if that's what the problem could be if we don't fix it, well, then how do you start fixing it and getting it sorted out? One of the first things you need to do is to create a concept model to understand the core data concepts within your business and the kind of relationships between them, to construct that. That's kind of like step one. And then within that concept model, there are master data concepts, if you like, or entities that you can highlight. You can see customer here, for example. You can see a product here as well. And so you can highlight within the concept model what the core master data entities are. Having done that, then you can take that concept model and use it to jumpstart your business glossary, to create a business glossary in a data catalog these days. Lots of data catalog products out there, all of which are pretty well carrying a business glossary. So I can then define what the key master data entities are, and I can then start to, build out the attributes associated with describing a customer or a product or employees or suppliers, and then get the definitions of what a customer is and what a supplier is, for example. And then once we have that, and using a data catalog can help us find the other attributes associated with those entities, we can then start to build pipelines to construct and integrate the data needed to build those master data entities and store them in an MDM system. And so getting multiple communities to be able to do this, to help you define your master data entities, is a key part of an overall MDM project, and very much also part of a data governance project. And so by default, if you like, master data management is pretty central to any data governance program. So by getting subject matter experts together, we can bring together the right people in your organization to define, what a supplier is. Maybe that comes out of procurement, where a lot of those people who understand that data are working. Front office employees could be more focused around things like customer, whereas of course product managers and whatnot would be more associated with product information. But the idea is to understand the relationship between physical data out there in lots of data stores and all the physical data names with the business data names defined in a business glossary, so that we can map those physical data names to a business glossary. And these days, of course, data catalogs are very good at this kind of thing, where they can connect to a range of different registered data sources and then automatically discover what's in those systems and map it back to my business glossary in order to know where the physical data out there representing a customer or representing a product or representing a supplier may be. And then having got that mapping, we can then take those entities as defined in my business glossary and then build pipelines using data fabric software, to integrate the data from disparate sources, so that we can then publish that data in a data marketplace to make it available to be consumed in a broad range of systems in a trusted zone. So the idea here is to build up ready-made, so that you have a kind of ready-made set of master data available. And of course, you can build more than master data with this approach. You can also build trusted data products associated with your transactions, as well as with your master data. But we're just focused primarily on master data here. So starting with a concept model, we can then jumpstart our business glossary, fill out the attributes associated with describing those entities, and then having done that, use the power of a catalog to automatically discover what's out there and map it to the glossary, and then we're in a position to then build the pipelines to create the trusted integrated master data that we need to create. And so ultimately you could do that, for example, in a data lake environment, whether that's on cloud storage or whether it's on premises on something like Hadoop. You could certainly pull together this data, integrate it, and then produce trusted master data in your MDM system, which can then be available for consumption in both transaction systems and analytical systems. I'm just showing analytical systems here. Consuming master data, for example, in a data warehouse, which would be like a dimension within a data warehouse. But we all know that master data, of course, is used to synchronize both transaction systems and analytical systems, whether they be on premises in your data center or in one or more clouds, in order to keep them synchronized. And of course, we can do that either through push or pull. If we push it out, we can push it out through REST APIs into target applications, or we can push it out into middleware like a service bus and deliver it, push it once and deliver it many to anything connected to it. We can send it out in a file, and we can also extract it and load it into data warehouses. So, and any changes to that master data be treated as slowly changing dimensions. I mean, in an ideal world, deeper integration would be needed. Once you've got the synchronization going, you can look for deeper integration, perhaps between transaction systems and master data management APIs, to be able to get at common master data and share it across multiple transaction processes, transaction processing systems, as well as being able to push it out into analytical systems, such for use in data science or data warehousing or other kinds of analytical systems. And in a modern architecture associated with a data warehouse, for example, you would then see how your master data management system would fit. It's upstream of your data warehouse, and here you can see the master data cleaned and integrated to populate your MDM system. And then from there, the dimensions in this data warehouse indicated by a D. The F is for facts. The dimension data would come from the trusted data source, in this case your MDM system, whereas the facts would come from the transaction system. And so the benefit of that is it simplifies ETL processing into a data warehouse and guarantees that any analytical system, not just data warehouses, would have consistent master data taken from the same source. But all of this stemming from a starting point. That starting point absolutely is clear. It's a concept model, in my opinion. Master data is, as I said, the most widely shared data in any business. It's critically important to business to have consistent master data because it affects pretty well every part of your operations. And customer data doesn't just live in a sales system or in some CRM system. It's in your service systems, it's in your marketing, it's in your sales, it can be in your ERP system, it could be in your distribution system. So this data spreads all over the place. And if we have inconsistent, ungoverned master data, it will cause process errors, it will cause delays, it will result in unplanned operational costs, which can spiral out of control if you don't address it. It can result in delayed decisions or inaccurate decisions, which means you're not as effective as you would be, or you miss opportunities. It could potentially result in non-compliance. And of course, the cost of operating a spaghetti architecture can be staggeringly high, especially with those data flows being so brittle and could break so quickly and easily. And so the cost of ownership is often beyond acceptable. So the first step in sorting it out is creating a data concept model, which is why to me that area is so important in order to be able to get your data under control. And it's a quick way also to get your business glossary and your whole data governance program, on the right footing in order to get that up and running and effectively start leading to creating MDM systems that will help reduce your operational cost, help reduce the number of anomalies that are occurring in your business processes, make your processes more smooth running, more efficient, more automated as a result of all of this, and dramatically simplify the business processes, and hopefully the result of that is less resources needed to fight the fires caused by ungoverned master data. So I hope that gives you an idea why I think master data management is so important, and some of the key steps behind it. Of course, it's a huge topic in its own right, but I hope that's given you a good idea. So with that, I'd like to say thanks very much, and hand back to you, Juha.
Thank you, Mike. Really illuminating and rather scary story also about all those problems that poor master data could cause you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it so many times. A lot of people say, well, we don't need to do this, but the consequences of not doing it, you can see it ripples all the way through a business. And often people don't necessarily initially attribute those problems to master data, but when you dig into it, you often find that the root cause of it tends to be a lot of inconsistency, and it can really get bad if if you don't deal with it over a number of years. It can get progressively worse, and often is not realized because people are often working on departmental problems, but actually all those departmental problems could be caused by things happening upstream in a different department because of those errors. So yeah, a lot of issues, and certainly well worth sorting out within any business.
Absolutely so. And you've been talking about this for quite a while already, and the world is never ready.
Absolutely.
There's always
you look
a problem
at
somewhere.
the surveys I keep seeing. I was looking at one of the largest surveys in the world on BI. For the last 4 straight years, believe it or not, number one issue in BI is master data on the biggest BI survey, in the world today. So no question about it, even in 2021, a long time after master data management first emerged, we are still having major problems with this kind of data. But it's so central to every business that we got to do something about it.
Absolutely so. So thank you, Mike, for that.
Okay.
Let me take over from here with just a few points about what we are doing to help you with the master data thing, and coming back to your starting point of where to start with master data, how to basically understand what the master data is. And this is actually an issue that we've faced a lot in our clients. There have been many cases where we have been asked how should we deal with this, how to approach this problem. And Ellie's approach to everything, of course, is that we approach things via the kind of medium and methodology of data modeling. And for us, that data modeling is a communication method first and foremost between your businesses, between your business and IT, which we want to make as fast and easy as possible so that you get that basic stuff sorted out, you get that basis, you get the concepts on which you start building things like master data management. And Ellie is a fast and easy tool, the fastest, the easiest tool for that, of course, completely cloud-based, no installations anywhere, and so on. And we also want to keep it and make it so that also the business experts, the SMEs who really know what is going on and what the everyday problems and processes of the business are, can also get involved. So it's very cooperative in that sense. And the idea with Ellie in master data initiatives that we've seen quite a lot now, especially recently with our clients, is that the understanding of what these core master data items are, like you had, Mike, you had the customers, products, and assets going on there all the time, that organizations don't often understand very well what they actually are. So the problem there starts very early, that you are building a master data management system or process or something. That's good, nice, well done. But you're starting it from the kind of point where you already have confusion around those core entities. And that is something that we can help solve. The ways of modeling that Ellie supports are kind of driven towards understanding, driven towards communication, and figuring out what are these entities that I care about, how are they linked together, and are there perhaps, let's say, entities that are very similar to the ones that I have, but which still are completely different. And understanding and exploring these kind of related data entities, what they are, where they are, this is what enables you to start with your business glossary set up, with your data entities set up, and then driving towards the MDM, as you said, by picking basically your master data entities from the model, saying that here is what we need to do. So I will soon show you how that looks like in practice, but as a process of modeling, what we like to tell our customers and users is that it has to start with the business need and you as a modeler understanding the kind of story of the business process, that, well, a customer comes and walks into a store and makes a purchase. And from that already you can and you have to identify the actual core objects, not from your system descriptions and database diagrams, but from the actual business real life events that happen, because those are the real master data entities in there. And you can build on that. You can add relationships between entities. You can define what do you mean by a customer, what do you mean by a prospect, and add those important attributes and definitions which make up your business glossary, and then utilize this understanding while building your master data management processes and systems. So the approach here is not just for the master data team to figure out what they are doing, but also for the entire organization, for everyone to understand what actually goes in your master data, what are the building blocks of that master data asset that you're going to utilize in your transactional systems, in your analytical systems, in whatever. So this is the approach here. And we'll come back to this slide very soon. Let me just jump very quickly to Ellie here, because what I want to show you is how do we approach these kinds of models. Now, what you should be seeing at least is my Ellie here in a Chrome browser. As I said, this is completely cloud-based and web-based application, no installations. This is my personal environment here. And we have a bunch of models. We have the business glossary, more on that very, very soon. And the idea here is that we can create a model like this. This is actually the same model that Mike had in his presentation. And what we have done here is basically we have started from things like customers and figured out, okay, what is a customer really? Well, there are companies and persons, and okay, we can generalize that. We can create this kind of a party entity. Well, yes, maybe could be a good idea, and a party can be a customer or it can be a vendor. And how I'll come back to that later, but how that works is we basically start with my new model number 4 here, for example, and we start to figure out that, okay, we have customers, and we have integrated in the tool the business glossary into this whole modeling thing. So I have already added all kinds of entities into my business glossary. So I see that, yes, I'm interested in the customer here. Let's take that, and I want to have the companies and persons that make up the person, and there we go, and we can start linking these things together, thinking, well, actually company can be a customer, person can be a customer. Okay, we want to have the party entity to basically group those together, and we say that a party can be either a company or a person, and we start figuring this out. So a party, basic ER modeling here, but then we start to come to the difficult questions of master data, which are, for example, that in real life you might have delivery events, the transactions that go through your processes, and your invoices, for example. And now you start to think, are the same customers always involved in all of these actions? And perhaps you realize, as we did in a couple of situations actually, that you actually have bill to customers who are involved in this invoicing, who might or might not be the same as the customers involved in the deliveries. And then you start to realize that, okay, well, then there are shipped to customers. And that's another entity. And now we start to get to the interesting point here. What exactly goes into my customer master data? So is it made of all the customers? Is it made of all the companies and persons that I know of? What about the vendors? So if we have vendors who are also parties, are these in the customer master data? Probably not. So do I have the ship to customers there? Do I have the bill to customers? What about prospects? What about leads? And there we come to this realization that customer is not nearly definite enough to be actually a word that describes in any detail your master data contents. So far we're just drawing things here, and going back to the model, we can draw all kinds of things, and we can see that, yes, by recognizing prospects and products and whatnot, we can start to see how these different things interact and how they are related. But the glossary, when I double click on the customer here, we define into the glossary what do we mean by a customer. And this is kind of the global definition now for this hypothetical company here of customer. We can add examples, whatnot. We can list the attributes. What do we know about customers? And the important thing is that as you add these entities into Ellie, from all of those models, you're always using the same entities that you've defined once in your glossary. So Ellie tracks that, and you can start to see that, okay, I'm actually using the customer entity in a bunch of models, and there are subtypes that I've defined to it. There are different sorts of relations to other master data entities, to other contracts, agreements, transactions, whatnot, and you start to see that I'm using this customer in these and these ways, which also helps you to figure out, is this really the master data entity that I want to use, or should it be like, let's say, legal customer, which might be something else that does contracts or so on and so forth. So you start to understand these differences, and you start to see the big picture of how things are interlinked while you build up your glossary. And this works in Ellie in such a way that you basically have all these models in which you have these entities. You define those entities just once in your glossary, and you have everything in this list, which then can be linked to your data catalog, which can be linked to your physical data. And that's how we basically approach the situation that Mike described. So you need to have your basis set up straight, and then you can start building on that. So that's basically how Ellie works. There's an integrated glossary with all these different models in which you use those glossary entities, and that gives you the ability to discover what your master data entities actually are about, and if there are even possibly some entities that should have centralized master data, but you just didn't realize it. So that's how Ellie works in practice. And let me go back to the slide for a moment there. The example model here, as I said, tells you what are the master data entities, and you can ask the questions that matter. Does your finance organization even know about ship to customers? In one case that we met along the way, they didn't, and they were thinking that they have full master data about customers. Can you link vendors and customers? Do you know that an organization is at the same time a vendor and a customer, which might be from a risk management point of view a completely different situation? But yeah, that's basically how Ellie approaches these things. And the idea here is that before you jump into the technical details of setting up those all important APIs and ESBs and all other acronyms and initialisms and figuring out how to share that master data, that's all kind of going to go into a wrong direction unless you understand these questions first rather deeply. Ellie is made to help you in that work. The methodology of this kind of easy, lightweight, business-driven data modeling that we have here is something that you can apply very fast, something that will guide you towards those actual questions that you need to answer, and also something that you can reuse once you get, for example, with your data warehouse development project or new ERP or whatever. You can also always come back to those models as long as they describe the reality of your business rather than the contents of an individual database. You know that you are on the correct level there that you are doing something that is reusable, building up your glossary and setting up things straight for your future data governance and master data management and other efforts. So that's basically Ellie's approach to this. And if this kind of interests you more, we have of course free demos and other content in our YouTube channel, whatnot. You will of course get links to all that later. But I do think now, Mike, there's time for questions and answers, and let's see what sort of things do we have in the chat. Any comments at this point, by the way, Mike, regarding the overall Ellie presentation?
I think for me, the thing I like about it is it's lightweight. It's really engaging from a business point of view. You know, you often look upon data modeling as a professional IT role, you know, and I think that's one of the key things here in order to get this right, is that you get maximum business participation in concept modeling, because then the questions you mentioned can get discussed and get worked out, rather than missing half of these questions and coming up with something that is, you know, might look comprehensive, but is actually missing a number of the business requirements. And so for me, I think that for me is one of the strong elements to this, plus the glossary, plus the idea that you can then go forward and integrate these with, you know, other key data management technologies like catalogs that you mentioned.
Indeed, yeah. And I think the thing worth emphasizing once more is the idea that we do want this to be business driven, in the sense that you actually communicate with the actual experts. This is not an ID thing really from the start. This is something that you have to understand as you had your orders moving through your processes. You have to understand the realities of the business in order to recognize the important master data elements, in order to build up a data architecture which is actually robust in terms of master data, which in its turn again then helps you reduce those costs and risks involved in this poor handling of master data. But onwards to the questions, we have quite a few here, interesting ones. Oh yeah, let's start with this one. Tony asked, Mike, I think your best answer to that, to answer this. Is there a distinction between sort of basic MDM and advanced MDM, or do all of these platforms do pretty much the same thing? Now, probably thinking the kind of technical MDM solutions. What do you think, Mike?
I think most businesses have to solve an MDM problem. I'm not so sure that technical MDM or advanced MDMs is really sufficient here. I mean, they've got to solve master data synchronization across transactional and analytical systems. I often hear people talk about analytical MDM and transactional MDM. It's just kind of breaking it down to, well, okay, we'll start with analytical first and get those right. Start with the transactional side first. I think for me, you know, master data management has to get solved, you know, from top to bottom in organizations. And so I think that advanced MDM, I'm not so sure what that is necessarily. So
maybe if we consider in terms of like applications for MDM and MDM systems, okay, that would you see there sort of a difference? I do agree actually with your viewpoint that in general there is just this kind of quite large minimum amount of stuff that a proper MDM system has to handle. But do you see there kind of on the market, for example, different let's say lightweight MDM solutions compared to kind of full suites of everything?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, absolutely. The kind of offerings on the market, you know, may be more to do with tooling to try and help you build your own master data entities, whereas some of the other high-end systems on the market come with, you know, predefined master data entities, predefined business logic in order to maintain the shareable business logic that can be used to maintain master data and be shared across multiple applications. They often come with predefined business processes, and so and also the tooling to customize. If you want a common process to onboard a new supplier or to onboard a new customer, that you now get the systems with all of that, even pre-built user interfaces and pre-built integration with popular other applications out there on the cloud or on premises. And so therefore the degree of sophistication of these systems builds up. So I definitely think the spectrum of master data management systems on the market is pretty broad. But I think for organizations, the deeper you go into getting master data shared and more tightly integrated into your applications, then very clearly getting reusable business logic and pre-built integration out of the box and pre-built processes is all going to save you a significant amount of time. But of course, you have to realize that you're going to have to pay for that if you want all of that ready-made out of the box, that you can get you up and running more quickly than an offering that probably doesn't have it.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that's actually a quite great segue to another question here. But I do think that pre-made models, pre-made setups for certain kinds of master data are, of course, time-saving, but they are also slightly dangerous. There's always a piece of risk involved because your own model doesn't necessarily match with what the system has. And this is actually something that we see, for example, with ERP projects regarding data contents, that the whole idea of what the business looks like from a business's data point of view doesn't really match with what the ERP thinks it looks like. But we had a question related to this, kind of related, which was that are there general or industry specific concept models available? And if I'll answer to that first, is that if you are talking about Ellie, then not yet, but we do have plans to look at this in the near future, and certainly it is something that we could do, which would be like figuring out kind of templates that you could utilize. And of course, you do have literature, you do have kind of these industry standard models on various levels of abstraction available for certain industries. Telecom has some, healthcare has some, but I do think that you will always still run into the question of what does my business look like, which you have to compare with your pre-made or pre-created industry standard model. And for that, you will always come back to the fact that you have to be doing some level of modeling yourself. Otherwise, you are kind of risking it and saying that, well, I'll take that and I'll hope it fits.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, you're probably always going to have to customize to some extent. But it's very difficult to customize a predefined model from a vendor in an MDM solution if you haven't done the exercise you mentioned, which is if you haven't gone to the trouble of understanding your own business, it's very difficult to then, understand where you should customize. But I think you've got to make sure that what you're buying, fits your business, or at the very least you can customize what you have in order, what you are buying in order to get that fit as close as possible to your business needs.
Absolutely. So there's also kind of a relevant question here. I'm not picking these in chronological order, but just building this storyline here nicely from these questions. There was a question that business expert time and sort of effort are scarcity. So how to overcome this challenge? Now, if we're talking about the fact that, okay, even though you would kind of purchase ready-made solutions and models and whatnot, you still have to figure out what the business actually looks like. And here I think the important thing is, as you actually, Mike, had in your slides, you had these kind of combined teams of different expertise, and that you do have the SMEs also therein. And I do think this is quite vital, and it is especially important for the data modeling part, because you can't have a data architect coming in from IT and creating your business model and glossary. They don't know what's the difference between an invoice and the delivery even, or an a financial document of type A or financial document of type B. That's not something that they know, and they even shouldn't know that. It's cooperation that is important here, and collaboration, and at least for us in Ellie, this is super important. We're aiming to kind of create something where everyone can get around the same table and discuss about these concepts and what actually exists in the business. And we're seeing often that it's not only just something that is discussed between IT and business, with the business trying to get the IT guys to understand, but it is also something that is discussed between business areas or divisions or departments, where you have people that have used the same words in different meanings, and now they come to the table with the model and they start to understand that, hey, this is not at all what we thought it was. Like Alec often says, what is a flight or what is a train? Not at all clear in usual cases.
Absolutely. I mean, the more collaboration you get around that, the more likely you're going to be able to, resolve those issues and allow things to progress. Whereas if you don't get all the right parties involved, very clearly, whatever you come up with, once you reveal it, some parts of the business are going to go, no, that just doesn't fit with what we want. And we've all been through that many, many times in the past. Clearly collaboration with subject matter experts is fundamentally important to trying to avoid all of those issues somewhere down the line.
Absolutely, and we want to make these things very fast and easy so that you are not spending the business experts' time on, building very complicated but technically beautiful models, but just to get the basics straight and to get the definitions straight so that your business glossary starts to live. There was another kind of, this is perhaps unrelated to that, but a good question, more technical in nature. Mike, I think you could catch this. Antti asked that microservices architecture has this concept of bounded context, i.e. duplicates with local definitions. How does MDM relate to this? What do you think about that, Mike?
That's a very good question. I think certainly I'm trying to understand what you would do with microservices in an MDM solution. I mean, there's no question that master data management software, data management software has all become microservices oriented. But I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that one, really, to be perfectly honest. I'm not an IT developer, so I'm not sure how I would answer that.
Yeah, this is a problematic one. It is an excellent question. Thanks, Antti, for that. But it is a problematic one if you consider that kind of duplicates of the objects that you could have kind of local definitions that would be separate. And if you still want to manage it all centrally in some way, then how do these link together?
That. Yeah, I think one of the things that's become very clear with some of my clients is that we've had a lot of problems with some of my clients to do with differences of opinion amongst IT developers who've been out there creating objects out of their head and then creating APIs around that in order to expose that data to other applications. And with mobile applications emerging in organizations connected to enterprise ones, there's been a real growth in APIs across enterprise systems in order to link all of that together. Certainly what I see is if you can get the master data right and defined within the glossary, then the glossary becomes the place where you can then define APIs. In fact, I've worked with an organization that created one of the data governance team came up with a great idea, which is to create Swagger files using the definitions within the business glossary in order to get consistency across APIs. And the response from their own development organization was that they got lots of developers calling them up or emailing them or messaging them saying, this is great, thank God I don't have to think about these stupid names out of my head anymore because I've got a company standard here. And so I definitely see that some of the consumers, if you like, of consistently defined master data could indeed be developers, through getting, common descriptions, for APIs so that you share data consistently across applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, I think related question here. We maybe have time for a couple more. Yes, related question here. Now, interesting as you mentioned this kind of the kind of IT developers versus the rest. But a question here saying, do you see master data systems moving from kind of this IT-led hub building style to more like business-led data curation systems? So are we kind of moving? Because I do see, personally, I do see this happening with many other data-related things. We're talking about citizen data scientists, and we are talking about data democratization, and things are moving out from IT. So what's your view here, Mike, regarding master data systems?
I think it's got to be collaborative. And the only reason I say that is not because I'm pro IT or anything like that. I fundamentally believe that business has to be involved in this. But the last thing you want is 20 different versions of a customer being created by different parts of the business, and everybody, in different parts of the business going, I'm right and they're wrong. I mean, that's the last thing we want. That's just not helpful. What we want is collaborative, if you like, definition of what these things are, and therefore, sharing and working at a concept model level is a great way to, let's say, avoid some of those problems further down the line. I think if everybody, I mean, a lot of people say, well, let's have each department come up with their own data names. That often ends up with multiple different definitions for the same data. I would rather have multiple synonyms for the same definition than multiple definitions for the same data. I think glossaries accommodate, different synonyms for the same data, but they got to be anchored on a common definition. Otherwise, you're really in trouble, because then you're going to end up with multiple versions of what a customer is. Now, I'm sorry, but having multiple versions under the name of agility is not something that a CFO is going to listen to if his operational cost is skyrocketing because of master data problems. We've got to look at this from a practical business point of view as well. We've got to get collaboration, because everybody in the business works for the same company, and there has to be some collaboration in order to resolve the issues and solve the problem whilst reaping the benefits. It's not about just let everybody define their own and forget about everybody else.
I totally agree, and even though I'm a great proponent of business-led everything, that I think that master data is one of those topics that just is by its nature something that is kind of centralized. Usually, it's the whole idea is to centralize certain things, and I do think why not do that within IT department? I mean, yeah, makes sense, but I think it's at least something that you can't easily like federate or distribute, because you end up with the problems that you said. But that being said, still, as you said, collaboration is key. So if it is an IT-led technology project, that's not going to fly. It's not going to end up anywhere. You'll end up with a bunch of fancy systems that have nothing to do with the actual business. And this is also something where the kind of language of data modeling comes in, because it provides you the capability to communicate between businesses, between business and IT, and within IT, to basically figure out what is going on in the real world and how do we actually produce solutions that solve the real world problems rather than technological problems of APIs and whatnot.
Absolutely, because I also think as well that one of the key things to realize here is you've got to be able to articulate the business problems that go right across a business and can cause a ripple effect right through a business. And if you can understand those problems from end to end and communicate them, I think it's a great way in which to get people from different parts of the business collaborating together, because they all realize the value of solving this. If there's no understanding of why they need to do it, then the chances of them cooperating rather than saying I want to have a customer my way or my way or my way, without understanding the business cases for this, it's difficult to get business involved, which is why I spent some time at the beginning, because I can assure you, the slides in my presentation weren't built out of theory. They're built out of a lot of pain that I've experienced over a lot of years in different customers, seeing these kinds of issues emerging and a lot of them down to, a root cause of which is to do with inconsistent and ungoverned master data.
Indeed, that's completely true. I think, Mike, we're actually about to run out of time here, so
Okay.
I think that was an excellent ending speech there. I have nothing to add to that. I'd like to thank you, Mike, for being here today, to thank you for the information that you shared, all your experiences, and thank you all attendees. You will be able to get your hands on this material, these slides and whatnot, and the whole recording later. You see on the screen now links to various things, YouTube channels and social media tags and whatnot. So we can continue discussion there. Contact us, have a chat. And Mike, thank you so much for this, and hope to meet you again soon.
Thanks very much indeed, Juha. Thank you.
Thank you all, and have a nice rest of the day.